Without further ado, hi, hello and welcome to Reluctant Mongoose. My name is Lil and this is my little space on the internet designed to help keep me accountable for being creative and hopefully inspire you to be creative too. And today we are finally going to be painting the Pott'd 12 days of clay, which is 12 days of clay and, well, 6 days of clay and 6 days of painting advent calendar pieces, and finally going to get this finished off. It's currently Christmas Eve, hence the fit. So we'll see how long it takes me to get these done. First up, we'll start with the base coat and then we'll move on to painting and we'll do the comparisons. So without further ado, we'll get on with that. As we said, our 6 days of painting starts with base coating everything. I initially thought that this base coat was some kind of special paint for air dry clay, like a sealant or a protectant, but after using it, I now think it was just white paint to provide a blank canvas for you to paint the bits of clay better. That said, this stuff went on to the clay really well and only needed 2 coats, which is rare in a white paint, so there might have been something else in it. And it's just as well it only needed 2 coats as there wasn't enough to do anything more than that anyway. I did manage to use up this whole bottle despite it being difficult to use out of the bottle. Obviously we've just seen it pop its lid out of the plastic nozzle just from the effort of me squeezing the bottle to get the stuff out, and I'm not exactly the Hulk, I'm a bit of a weed, so yeah, that kind of tells you quite a lot. I mean, you can see here I'm getting quite a lot of it on the brush handle and you lose a lot of product that way, so it wasn't very user friendly. At this point though, I shouldn't really be surprised at the lack of thought that's gone into the practical use of supplies from this kit, because as we know, my opinion of that isn't very high on this. Anyway, for practicality's sake, I got all of the base coating for all 5 projects done in one go because I didn't want to be faffing around going backwards and forwards between different things. And if I'm going to have trouble getting the base coat out of the pot once, I might as well just get everything messy once and get it over and done with. We are now nearing the end of that basics bit of base coating, so hopefully we'll get onto something better soon. Once I got all the base coating done, I decided I needed a cup of tea, and that was very, very well earned. Do like a cup of tea, it makes everything a little bit better. And then, as we can see next, the bottle was completely empty, completely used up, as much as I could do. I do think this would have been much better and much easier to use if it was in one of the squeezy tube things like the acrylic paint they'd given us was. I think the only reason this was in one of these plastic bottles was to make it stand apart from the paint and be separate. Anyway, we then are able to move on to the painting section, thank finally. Thank finally? That makes no sense, never mind. The words are hard today and the hards are wording too. So to give the base coat enough time to dry properly, this is the day 12 project, the one that I'm most annoyed at. We could have had a polymer clay candy cane tree ornament tutorial, but no, we had a painting a red hat on our brand mascot in acrylic, which won't work as it's a shiny glazed surface tutorial. So yeah, do what you want with that. You'll see, I did give it a good go. I used the brush and the paint supplied, which is something the official tutorials did not. They used, if you have this set and you watch their tutorials, you'll see that they used a lot of different brushes, which I don't think is very good. I really wasn't impressed with that. And then when I kind of came to do the painting of the other projects, I found that they'd stuck together. So not only had I had an issue with the painting of the mascot thing, the clay bits are stuck together, so I needed to go for a walk. The dog needed to go out. I took myself out as well, just to try and chill myself the fork out, because I was getting more and more annoyed. I tried to kind of do the whole touching grass, being grateful for what you can see thing, taking note of all the things you can see around on my local walk, which was nice. It's always nice to kind of take a moment out of things. And we get back and then we're back onto painting the hat on the ornament again, which, yeah, how can they get away with calling that no. Have any of you got this project? What do you think of this? Because I'm really not impressed at all. as hard as I try to be careful, but I'm not a delicate person, and it's a biggish brush for that project. So I just, yeah, no, I had trouble staying inside the lines and trouble applying the paint evenly. So I kind of abandoned that and moved on to the actual bits of clay that we were going to paint. As I have 5 projects to cover, I found 5 different mediums to try. I've got the potted acrylic paints, and that's going on this gingerbread man to start with. I have my Arteza outdoor acrylics, my Enmi and my Artex markers, and then lastly, I remembered I have some Crelando acrylics as well. If you live in the UK, you might recognise Crelando. They're the middle of Lidl art brand. So back onto our gingerbread man. I found coating this, the paint worked as well as you'd expect paint to. It got into some bits and didn't get into other bits. It's definitely needed more than one coat because it wasn't very good. And then I found more issues. So as you can see, where my fingers touched the tacky acrylic, it's pulled off not just the paint, but the base coat as well. And that is what made me realise that the base coat wasn't any kind of sealant. It was literally just a base coat for the paint. It was more like gessoing something. And I think by this point, I'd had enough. It felt like one issue after another with this box, and I was losing the will a little bit. This entire thing has taken me so long to do. I was expecting a nice fun series of clay projects that would be enjoyable, engaging, and I feel like I was disappointed. It wasn't an advent calendar. The products don't match up to what I was expecting, and that it could have been so much better. I mean, you can see with this, the house that I'm painting now with my Arteza paint, one coat of paint was all that was needed. But again, I did the finger test on it, and the tacky acrylic pulled off the base layer right down to the clay. So it wasn't the paint, it was the base layer that was the problem. And here I'm comparing the Pott'd acrylic to the Arteza acrylic, and you can see the Pott'd acrylic is much streakier and less opaque than the Arteza stuff. I did go back and do a second coat of the brown on the gingerbread man. I didn't need to on the gingerbread house because the paint was opaque enough. I do think that the paint for the gingerbread man was a little on the dark side. I could have mixed it and brightened it up with a bit of yellow, but Pott'd didn't provide a mixing palette, so I have to assume that they never intended for us to do any kind of paint mixing and simply expected us all to follow the tutorials word for word. Next up, we are moving on to the 2 mostly flat projects. I decided to use my acrylic markers for these, so we have the Artex markers for the holly leaf tea light candle holder thingy. At least the battery works in the tea light. That's something. I did find that the markers going onto this surface were really dry, and that was for both the Artex ones and the Enmi ones. Wasn't really much of a difference between them, and you'll see that they actually dry quite streaky as well. They both needed 2 separate coats to kind of alleviate some of that streakiness. There wasn't much in between the two sets, to be honest, on this project, which is honestly, it surprised me a little bit because there was such a clear difference with the 2 sets on using the gnome and on paper. So clearly they've got their different uses and different purposes, and I think some of that what you use often comes down to preference. I still find the Enmi set much easier to use, but that's just me. Right, next up, we're on to this wreath. So when I did this wreath, I very deliberately didn't slip and score the stars onto it, just to show you how easy they would be to pop off. Oh, hello, Loki. Loki had been pawing at me from under the table and wanted to come up to see what I was doing, so I picked her up and let us see what we were doing. Anyway, back onto this. I very deliberately didn't slip and score the stars onto the wreath, but did slip and score the bow. because the stars, you will see, pop off incredibly easily. And I just wanted to show you the difference that makes to the overall sturdiness, I suppose, of what you're making with clay, because it's got that much less area to stick to and you've not stuck it down properly. I just popped them off so easy. But yeah, that was a sidetrack. Like I said, both the ME and the Artex markers were both kind of streaky when in applying, but what I did notice, because they were dry going on, they dried a lot quicker, were tackier for a lot shorter, and I had none of the peeling the acrylic paint off with the base coat issue that I had with the first two projects. So we're just comparing those two. Obviously the colours are different because they're two different pens sets, but you can see they're both streaky. Again, I did go back in with a second coat for both of these, and I did that off camera because watching paint dry, dull and boring. I did also add some more patterns onto that wreath, but apparently I forgot to press record on the camera, so that will just be a nice surprise for you for watching to the end to see how that came out. Last up, we are using the Crelando Middle of Lidl acrylic paints on this Christmas tree. Usually I am pleasantly surprised with the quality of the stuff that I pick up from Lidl, because you don't expect much. They're cheap as chips, or cheaper than probably, and the papers that I've had from there have been really good, but those paints were bad. We're flicking back to that cursed ornament again, and you can see this is why we don't paint ceramics with acrylics, because it scratches off. I did go back in the end and scrape it all off and coloured it all in with an alcohol marker, which works so much better. I decided my hands were quite shaky when I was finishing these off, so that's why I'm using one of my markers on the rest of the gingerbread house. I think I proved that the Arteza paint was better quality than everything else, so I didn't feel the need to keep using that. And painting with shaky hands, it's not a good look, so I used one of the paint pens to try and make my life easier. And I did parts. I had originally wanted to go in with a bit of a dry brushing technique on the roof, but by this point I think I'd had enough and I just wanted to get everything finished. I am also I kind of wanted to see how opaque the white paint was from Pott'd, and it needed a couple of coats, even though it was just squiggly lines. But because I didn't have a detail brush and I was using the fine end of the pointed brush which had been supplied, it was difficult. We're on back to the tree for the final details on the tree, and this is the Crelando paint. It looks like I've just painted it with glue. That's how bad that is. It was fine in the darker colours, but those lighter colours, you often see the true quality of a paint in the white, and that's why I think the Crelando paint showed that it is cheap paint. The Pott'd stuff was marginally better, but only marginally so. And oh my goodness, whilst I've been rambling on, we've finally got to the very last step of these projects, varnishing them. And thankfully, because this varnish wasn't as thick as the base coat, their little squeezy bottle thing actually worked, and what probably was the best receptacle for the job. And you got a sneak peek of the wreath when it was finished. I still have loads of that gloss varnish left. I did go and do both the top and the bottoms and the fronts and the backs and all the rest of it. I even did inside of the gingerbread house to make sure that was all sort of sealed in as much as it could be. I'm very interested to see how these will last over the next year, being stored away in the loft. Because this clay hasn't been vitrified, it will attract damp. And now we're on to the final reveals. This is the holly leaf with the tea light. This is the gingerbread man. The gingerbread man was supposed to be a trinket dish. I'm not sure how big the trinkets were supposed to be, because those are the stars that were on the and that's my hand, so that's a really bad shaky camera. But yeah, it's not going to hold an awful lot apart from dust, I think. I mean, yeah, the tea light fits in his head. Anyway, this is how the Christmas tree came out. It's not my favourite. It's really not my favourite. To be fair, I'd be happy with that. Just went in the bin, to be perfectly honest. And then last but not least, we have the Pott'd mascot with the alcohol marker painted hat, down to the wreath and then to the house. Those ribbons were ridiculously short. I needed tweezers to be able to do them up, and I'm amazed I managed to get them on the tree. Yeah, that's that. I'm not going to film an outro for this. Really tired and struggling today. So bye for now. Thanks for watching and have a great week. Love to you all.